Say how long it'll take to get a group together? I mean, it's still the same, yeah. So the deep cut here is the player pop is probably the player pop is arguably the same. The player distribution is different now. It's probably even yeah. So there's been a redistribution of player pop. So certain aspects of the game is even slower than it was before. Or I would say it's more certain aspects of the game related to player pop is more exclusive than it's ever been. Which is basically the type of people that Western MMORPGs attract. I usually use the euphemism nobility as the word in these recent explorations of Neverwinter's live service model. The word I use is nobility. It's a little different from meritocracy. I would be floored and be very hesitant to say skilled is the dividing gap. I was never one of those nobles. Perhaps a jester, but not a noble. I think you're confusing privilege with entitlement. The only reason I say that is because of how you easily summarized my terminology without understanding what it stands for. I were always... Oh no, that's not what I'm referring to. Oh, we're not even on the same page at the moment. Oh, that's what you mean. Actually, I'm mistaken by what you meant, actually. No, we're talking about like we're talking about how runs are formed. So because there's a redistribution of the player pop due to some of the recent changes, when you said the thing about getting groups together is a nobility thing. It's not a availability thing. So like even if you play a healer or a tank, your overall group frequency is still down from what it used to be, because you have to be a noble. You have to be in a clique. Even more so than ever. We've done a few public things. I did already did an attempt to do a public thing for demonstrating what it's like to public group stuff. Yeah, that's what I meant by noble. So I think I fundamentally misunderstood you as well. We were talking about forming groups as a tank. Yeah, kind of. It's still pretty alright, I would say. Tank and healer. Just the accessibility is different now. Alright. Do explain what you mean. You are respected and known as a good, so group wanted you over others? Okay. I'm not entirely sure if that's what noble means. I do understand that now that's how you understand what noble means. Being desired is different from thinking you're entitled. So I literally said that a nobility is not an element of meritocracy. So you're talking about merits. This game is not built on merits. It's built on nobility. A lot of people have left the game for that too. Well, actually, most of them are not here anymore. If I were respected and known, it's a meritocracy. That's not nobility. Nobility is gaining, is being assumed to be good and desirable without experience. It's an insult to call myself a noble. That's largely why I didn't hang out with organizations a lot of times. Just a personal choice. Nobles are perfectly happy most of the time. We're not I'm not making a commentary on whether you can be happy or sad. I'm perfectly happy not being a noble. Nobles are leaders, by the way. That's a quality that's kind of nice. In the day? Well, you stop playing this game because 2 other people stopped playing, so that's part of the nobility. Meritocracy does not operate on the dependency of other people's legacy or presence, right? If you're seeking meritocracy, your actions are your own. You are not dependent on the legacy of others or in association with others. It makes you actually less desirable than a noble. You stop before they to join your brother, that's a nobility. It's nepotism. You're joining family. Which is great. Nobility has qualities of loyalty. I didn't. So, even though it might seem like people desired me in their group, it's more what I could offer, not that I'm a friend or someone that has personal investment in them. They would trust other people if they could. Someone who is part of the meritocracy is more like mercenary work, right? If we were doing like a fantasy thing, you would qualify more as a merc. Someone that offers skills and services, but rarely have emotional investment. Initially, you said that you stopped playing the game because 2 people are not around anymore, and now you said you stopped before because to join your brother. That's nobility. That's about nepotism and family. And it breeds a lot of loyalty and emotional investment and stuff. They are why you won't go back? Oh. Okay. That's also an element of nobility. Because you're attaching the product to your feelings about people or what they stand for, as opposed to what they do. History. It's a very reasonable mindset, by the way. It's a really common one. It's a cultural, it's a very common cultural thing, especially to Western culture. Or what the company who made the game did, nobility. So you're relying on history as opposed to what's happening in the present. Exactly. I'm absolutely on the same page as you are. What makes monarchs and the feudal system powerful? Legacy. What makes an empire powerful? Legacy. If it was a meritocracy, leadership would change rapidly. Ideas would change rapidly. Because it's only based on merits. It involves a specific culture, and that is usually the New Age culture in Asian countries. And what I mean by New Age is because even Japan went through an imperial period, right? Until the emperor became more of a figurehead. And then we had the shogunate. So it's kind of like the Xerexian Empire. Nobility. And you evaluate everything based on that nobility. I play this game from day to day, so when a new module comes out, it could be 10 out of 10. Who knows? I don't know. I do relate to you though, because Cryptic is largely designed along traditional sense. So their designs don't change rapidly. They're not the indie scene, right? They're not indie dev, and they also make a live service game. And live service games tend to promote iterative designs. So change is not rapid, and if it's disagreeable, it doesn't change for the agreeable very rapidly. And generally speaking, if something works, it rarely changes very rapidly. You're seeking the comfort of something you're used to. I seek the comfort of something novel. Is this novel? This game? No. Every time I come back to the module, I'm not playing the same game. Or I'm not playing it in the same way. I have other things to write about. More, yeah, not the gameplay. Yeah, sure. I got it. That's exactly what I'm describing. Attitudes to players and that's exactly what I'm describing. Yep. I understand your feelings about it. Absolutely. And I do make a criticism on that. If and when they release a new product. And not the baggage they carry. Usually. That's kind of how I play video games most of the time though. So what you say now makes you a prejudiced person. If tomorrow you say something different, then you are no longer a prejudiced person for the time being. Right? I'm not making a comment. I'm not making a comment that will impact your happiness or like what you do. I'm just recognizing that I have to understand that you weigh a lot on a person's principle, right? Like a group's principle. So that is very strong and is very important to you. I'm playing this. It's kind of a great contrast because I'm still playing this game because I differ, right? When there's a new module, there's still an opportunity to vilify some of the long-standing baggage. For a player that has left, like you, they have to make amends for a lot, like a history of stuff, because it's very important to you. And I want to connect it back to the player population. I say that largely the players that remain, that are consistent, that are keeping the player pop consistent, are those people who are sufficiently satisfied and sticking because of nobility, because of legacy. It actually makes it not involving any of the module stuff or what's happening. It's because they have each other, or it's a habit formation that's sufficient. I will only, you know, participate as long as there is content, because I am not a person who really gets attached to these things in that way anymore. I help when I can. That's how that works. So, how much do people know about me? Not very much, and that's my fault, right? If someone wants to know me really well, they'll probably have quite a bit of hard time, since I don't have the same type of attachment to these things. So when like people move guilds or have guild drama and stuff, it's very difficult for me to empathize with that. I feel one of the strengths in the nobility, or people who believe in baggage, is they are just equally as passionate if trust is there. And they can easily also be a double edge and feel betrayed just as much. So while I'm more tolerant and perhaps more forgiving, that's traded off with being less loyal and less passionate. It's very rehearsed. I had this conversation a couple times already. I think here's a really big one, right? Some people would say, like, well then, how do you ever form a intimate relation, you know, connection with someone? It's like, well, I don't. That's why I struggle with it. It's a trade-off of everything else. Am I comfortable with it? I'm pretty comfortable with it. Perhaps one day. It's very unlikely though. Was I close to Rick? Well, one day he stopped playing. One day he stopped streaming and we stopped talking. So I'm not entirely sure if you would consider that close. I believe... So here's the closeness thing, right? If someone stops talking to me because they changed something in their lives, I assume they're very healthy and they've been very busy with their life. So I'm happy for them. I don't know if that's the same type of closeness that most people refer to. To me, that's how I express closeness. To others, that might be not being close because you can easily let go of something. So in a way, if it's about like hanging out and, you know, actually doing the traditional thing, then we weren't really close. If it's trusting someone to always go and, you know, do whatever makes them happy, then we were pretty close. Because I was genuinely concerned about his health. I'm typically close in that nature to most people. I enjoy spending most of my time helping people with their problems. I'm attracted to problems. And when those people become healthy and bustling and busy, I naturally no longer interact with them very often. So I haven't interacted with Rick in a long while. And my optimism compels me to say that his life is pretty busy and he's healthy. I like to believe that until you know, he suggests otherwise. I haven't talked to him for over 2 years, I think, or maybe a year now. I think it's getting close to 2 years. Since we don't have a commonality of interest. It sounds very cold. I can definitely hear myself sounding very cold. However, I really just spend most of my time. I gravitate towards people who like demand my attention or reach out and address my attention. It was the same as Neverwinter. So I don't necessarily think sometimes people like to use my services or like join their group and stuff. It's just that I'm available too. I always make myself available. And because I'm available, I think that's a bigger driving force for the normalization than my skills, because I don't particularly think I spend enough passion and interest in any particular thing to be exceptional. I can consider myself above average in a lot of things because I have generalized skills, but I don't necessarily think I've ever practiced or invest in anything in this like type of context that would be constituted as extraordinary or anything that another person who's more passionate and loyal wouldn't be able to achieve. I do have specific skills that are unrelated to games that I am very proud of and arrogant and passionate about, but they're usually skills that no one think about and they don't address it. Those skills would be, for example, problem solving, critical thinking, and communication skills. Those are the three big ones. So most of the time, I'm forgettable when I'm not useful. And I enjoy that. When I become not useful, people forget about me. It means that they're healthy. And I move on to the next problem. What I do here on stream is an idea that I thought would be nice to talk to myself. So lots of self-talking, and then use it as an example for those who don't have a voice, right? To those who are more interested in being solitary people, exchanging ideas passively through examples. So that more or less works out a lot of times, actually. So there you go. It's not popular because popular people would hang out with other people and become dependent on them too. It forms very strong bonds. I usually form bonds through codependency, or actually it's more like a one-weighted dependency. I prefer to be the rock. That person you pass by, milk for some inspiration, that leads that person to a happy life. It's kind of like the cycle of being a teacher. I really find it incredibly poetic. It does take a specific type of person to do that kind of thing. In order to be an effective teacher and an instructor or some sort of consultation, you have to be effectively positive in your life, right? So, if one is to be constructive and be invested in a one-way temporary relationship, interpersonal relationship, you have to be willing to give but not receive anything in hindsight. So you're not motivated by the prospect of a return investment. So if I'm trying to help someone, I'm not asking them to be my friend. I'm helping them. If they want to be my friend, that's an incentive. If they don't want to be my friend, that's fine too. The whole idea is just so that I know that they are healthy. So that's the closest I get most of the time. And people go, you know, they come and go. And You might be thinking, well, then how do you, make sure to look out for number one? I used to do that. I look out for number one every once in a while. Now I don't have to, so I don't. And if I need to, I know how to ask for help. I have asked for help before. I've learned that skill. Well, you always enjoyed our combos and our games played. That's wonderful. I enjoy that. I'm glad you're having fun with something else that doesn't constantly remind you of the betrayal and the disgust you feel, right? I can't really echo any more than recognizing your sentiments. I do see where they come from, though, because I don't think that has changed, especially how Cryptic does things. It still does. They still continue to do that quite a bit. They are very big traditionalists, and that's probably also a reason what drawed a lot of traditionalists to the game. A game that doesn't evoke traditionalism would have personally thrown out many of the things that make this game D&D, right? In fact, they might have gone in an entirely different direction, even more so than the MMORPG already, if they were not interested in legacy. It's very interesting. I think one of the education stuff of playing MMORPGs is to understand different perspectives and how they can occupy the same space and interact with each other. Bad, good, violence, conflict of interest, etc. But yeah, I'm most definitely your observer and someone who is not personally invested a lot of times, and there is a trade-off. While I don't form a lot of interpersonal bonds with people, it also allows me to effectively solve people's problems too. So while if you guys are resonating, right, if you resonate with someone at a personal level, that might make you faster. It might also make you slower. It's very unpredictable, because blinders happen, right, when you're invested in someone personally, and then those same blinders could be the very thing they need. However, it creates this inconsistency. There's a variability. You could be passionately betrayed or passionately supported. So for me, as someone who's very attracted to problems and solving problems, the way to get a consistent result, right? It's never so bad, and it's never like the elixir of life. That's the personality I have usually. So when someone has nowhere to turn or at the bottom of the barrel, I can at least provide an average experience. Because when someone's at the bottom of a barrel, it could get even darker with someone who's co-suffering someone. So things like pity parties is a possibility. Spiraling groupthink. One miserable person makes another person more miserable by association. Or it can go the other way, misery deserves company kind of thing. But it's still risky because it doesn't introduce proactive solutions. And then you can have the opposite, an optimist partner speaking with a pessimistic partner. While opposites attract, right, and all that stuff, where it can create flings of passion, it can be a double edge. And when you are not emotionally invested, generally you act like the bridge for these things. So a lot of times my closeness is formed by just being someone who listens to understand and offer any form of conversation that stabilizes the person. And that closeness is temporary. Because when they are healthy and out and about, I often encourage them to keep exploring. It's the most, when you are healthy, again, exploration makes a person strong. And then just as a deep cut here, there's a sweetness and poetry to all of this. Over time, I've helped and interacted with very specific people who ultimately made me a very successful person. So if you do this a lot, eventually you build up a reputation, right? A rapport as a go-to guy. And if you do it enough, sometimes you get lucky. And now all I do is invest forward. That's pretty much what I do. It's not a lifestyle for everyone, I can tell you that. Sometimes you have to choose who you care about. And then you have to choose who your companies are. I think I have a privilege and possibly a double edge on the idea that I don't necessarily have to choose who my company is, both emotionally and intellectually. At the moment, I do know that there are a minor population of people, a very minor population of people, that I would make an exception. 95% of the time, I rarely discriminate a person who needs help. If a person needs help, they need help. I do the best I can. And if I don't actively see anyone that needs help in my vicinity, obviously they have to voluntarily do that. I spend most of my time recording and talking about how to communicate that. How to communicate help, both indirectly, directly, written, spoken, visual, musicality. And that will enable them to have as many tools as possible to communicate and express accurately to their comfort. So the idea is to use video games, music, visuals, maybe even learning a new language next year, a couple of new languages next year, as a vehicle to enable people passively to find their preferred way of expression. Because you can be a tough guy and still communicate that you're a danger to yourself. You can be a tough guy without sacrificing the imagery of being tough while still getting help, for example. Generally speaking, though, communication in general is a very underappreciated and unpracticed skill in the days of the internet and video games and whatnot. And that's what I'm streaming about. So that's my plug, I guess. That's what I do most of the time. Getting worse and worse? What do you mean getting worse and worse? Oh, you're gonna have to elaborate on that. What is getting worse? The communication? Oh yeah. Yeah, it's getting worse and worse. And it's a big deep cut. I talked about this a couple times. It's not maliciously done. It's normalized by all the conveniences we have. So for example, we get to see what we want to see. We get to hang out with who we want to hang out in this microcosm and the medium that we use all the time. Because of that pre-selection, the need for practicing communication is less and less. If you specifically rely on intuition by pre-selection, so say you play this game, so everyone who plays this game naturally pre-selects themselves into a particular personality pool. The likelihood of encountering like minds based on 2 or 3 coinciding interests will remove the burden to develop communication skills. Because you don't. Intuitively, people are on the same page. So they don't encounter difficulties of communication. I'm not saying that. I don't think people who are under practiced in communication skills fail to communicate given the proper pre-selection. If you're always with your brother, your communication skills can still be lacking, but it's not necessary to communicate. Communication is an out-of-body experience. It is an interpersonal experience. You are communicating with someone who can't read your mind. So naturally, if you spend most of the time inside your head, as in with someone very similar, you don't need to exercise that way. Like resolving disagreements, communicating a misunderstanding between semantics. The internet has made it very, very comfortable. In fact, YouTube algorithm TikTok reinforces that. So no longer do you have to watch something you don't want to watch. Be bombarded by an ad that you don't like. Yeah, the Western world can use a lot of more communication. And, you know, I know you're an older generation than I am. And before this convenience, right? This really wonderful normalized convenience that is what humans really desire a lot of times, but we also lose the practice of bumping into random people and, you know, encountering things we don't want to see and have to talk about it. Or, you know, like we have no, like, we have autonomy, generally speaking, over all our interactions 90% of the time. Heck, even the work environment has become more negotiable in not overcoming conflict and resolving conflict and compromising. It's more pandering to collective minds and groupthink and echo chamber stuff. So it's really great when it works. It's a double edge when it doesn't. So when these individuals spend most of their time very, very in their comfort and convenience, they're not incompetent, they're not insensitive people, just under-practiced. I really truly believe that humans, largely on average, have the same capacity with practice. So if you don't ever get into a disagreement, then you don't ever practice resolving disagreements, right? If you go online, there's going to be a YouTube video that tells you how to avoid every single possible mistake you can make while getting a job. Well, if you don't ever make a mistake, you don't ever learn or practice how to resolve them. And that's unfortunate. There are times when you can make mistakes, and there are times when you can't. Unfortunately, most of the time, it makes most people feel like you can't ever make a mistake. The echo chamber at the moment just spinning bad loops. I would say it's spinning, so not using the word bad, it's spinning loops that feed back on itself. So I'm gonna say the echo chamber in its own right spins closed loops. So when loops are closed, there's no new information entering and no new information exiting. There's no interaction with any other thing. So when something interacts with that loop, the loop can be so tight now that it rejects any incoming information. So the moment another loop encounters another strong loop, they repel very, very strongly, as a kind of a metaphor visual. of it. So in echo chamber, whether you disagree or agree with it, whether it's bad or good, the thing we have to know is an echo chamber is a closed loop. It does not invite new information very easily. And when done long enough, much like Nobility, it can be really comforting and reassuring. It's a natural order of things. Status quo, traditionalism, nationalism, that type of thing doesn't get balanced with any interpersonal skills that involve open loop, open-mindedness, enlightenment, meritocracy. So now we go back to Neverwinter. Neverwinter is built on traditionalism. Traditionalism is not a meritocracy. So when you're thinking about how they charge for money, like charge for the play, and then how they innovate on their game design, it's a closed loop system. Closed loops are slow to develop. They don't go and change by leaps and bounds. Leaps and bounds. They tackle each conflict holistically as a whole. So naturally, the problem solving doesn't cater to all the alternatives. It's usually approached in very similar ways. And that can be a blessing in disguise. When it works, it continues to work. When it doesn't, then it has to enter a catastrophic crisis in order to enter reform. What does a catastrophic crisis look like in terms of game development? Your game being imminently shut down. That could be a crisis. Then what you do is you have a change of leadership. The loop is broken. You throw in and crush the loop, cut the loop in half, and assign a new loop. So it goes back and forth. I don't necessarily think echo chamber and groupthink is inherently bad or good. It's just a stage in thinking, and you go back and forth. Or I like to think in the future the internet will healthily incorporate back and forth. But at the moment, the thing that made the internet explode is that you can always form closed loops on the internet. It is designed to exploit in a mutual way. Like, people like this exploitation of being fed what they want to see, what they want to hang out with, only the things they can possibly conceive as useful to them. So like a search engine will only provide the things you actively and voluntarily look for. You are your own closed loop. And I deliberately don't do that. However, I still have my comforts, right? I still play Neverwinter, technically. The mechanics in Neverwinter is a closed loop. For me. So I'm not thinking about it right now. I'm using the closed loop, though, to talk about something that's outside the box. Or beyond Neverwinter. And that's how I'm reaching the balance of compromise between the two. Loops are great if they work really, really well. The search engine was one of the most brilliant turn of the century inventions. Google has created one of the most efficient, well-oiled loops, I would argue, of my lifetime. It's going to be very difficult for someone to top the closed loop that is the search engine. Perhaps some generative AI stuff in the future might up the ante. You know, generative AI might introduce noise that creates fuzzy loops, right? Fuzzy logics, and then loops can permutate, mutate into multiple like fuzzy loops by having a generative AI suggest tangential ideas over and over again as a form of easy access. So the convenience of generative AI might offset the idea of making humans habitually fall into patterns in a healthy way. So naturally developing new habits while turning over other habits and then preserving certain habits and so on and so on. I spend most of my time talking about these things now. Although I don't think I've ever really changed that much from what I used to talk about. My life was, my early life was a pretty hard-hitting closed loop. Lots of closed loop. Until I went to college. And then that's when new perspectives and stuff really started changing my life. The way I teach people complex topics in order to easily understand, it actually comes from a person that changed my life a lot. And he was my college instructor. He was my college everything. He was a professor, academic advisor. I talk about him from time to time. It's truly an invest forward. He wasn't like the things he did, I didn't ask for. Like, what I mean is, that's kind of how I feel about my outlook on life. Sometimes I just make myself available. I'm adjacent to be available. And that's something just that person was available. And I clearly was unable to express how closed off and miserable I was. So, and this would be my way of investing forward. It sounds romantic. A lot of times, it might sound like it's like altruism. It's not really altruism. It's hard for me to believe in true altruism. It's a lifestyle that I found rewarding enough and sustainable. If it's not sustainable to you or to anyone else, then it's not a lifestyle, a viable lifestyle. It's something that's perceived as a lifestyle, but lifestyles have to be sustainable. So in no way would I say this is an appropriate lifestyle for a lot of people. Like, some people have to make money, right? Like, for example, lots of money. Some people have families, mouths to feed. I'm alone. What is a trade-off of my lifestyle? Well, usually people like me are alone, right? And if that upsets me, then I would probably try to change it. It doesn't upset me. So that's kind of the end game. If you don't want to be alone, what I'm saying is at least revealing that if you aspire to be influenced by me in some way, I would advise caution, because generally speaking, the mindset I'm talking about is associated with people who are alone most of the time. Not people who are lonely, people who are alone a lot of times. So it's good to know these things, at least be aware of these things. So do you want to be a rational person who gets invited to groups when they play video games and then get forgotten because they're going off to having better lives? It's all together. It's the whole package. And my rationale is that when someone moves on and do things, I hope in the future, the most rewarding thing I can think of, the biggest payback, and I don't think those people would be aware, is that one day, like say 10 years down the line, I see this person that I happen to have crossed my paths with that one time, and they became a superstar. That would absolutely change my life. Like, that's all I could ask for. Like, just someone like stopped by after 6 years and told me like, yeah, their life is the bee's knees. And then they just tell me about all the great things they've done. That would be probably the most rewarding thing. That used to be what teachers sound like. And I would argue there are still a significant but minority population left. Because life has really taken its toll on that type of perspective. Yeah. It's very in the vast minority. Where they're not human beings just trying to survive. Yeah, I mean, they toe the line because, you know, it's a demand thing, and unfortunately I can't find myself to not empathize with their the minimalism that they have to skirt because of just it's not reciprocated, right? So if you have someone who, like I mentioned earlier, the really golden goose when it comes to having to educate someone is that you have to be in a mindset that doesn't have to deal with stuff you have to take care of. If an instructor is to be the greatest benefit to someone, they can't be the less things that are clouded by their own requirements, the more effective they can be. And unfortunately, at least I know you live in a different country. In the United States, I think the vast majority of them are having to juggle their own things. So they are doing as humans do, trying to juggle their own personal things that they have to take care of while doing a job that's expected to not be reciprocated. It's also kind of a reason why there is a reason why I really respect my my professors that I've had the privilege of being educated by, because I'm not a professor, right? What does that say? I'm certainly not that. Like, they've got to be juggling more than I am, because I didn't become a professor. It actually kind of almost destroyed me. to be real, the last time I entered such a prospect, I took on so many things that it almost destroyed me. Destroyed me, like, not physically, it destroyed me mentally. It's just way too much. I just felt like I needed to keep doing more and more. So I'm no stalwart lion person who can handle the world and stuff, so I moderate myself as much as I can. Which is largely why I say this lifestyle is not for everyone. I don't think the mindset makes you any better of a person. Like, any better or lesser of a person by comparison. It's trying to find the balance that makes you happy sustainably, and then doing the best that achieves that. If you're a miserable teacher, you could even argue that you're doing more harm than help. So it can go both ways. Your position and status in life doesn't necessarily paint you your merits, right? So even if I'm highly educated, that doesn't mean I can't be a vehicle of harm, both intentionally and unintentionally. Humans, man. That's the human condition. I try not to put myself in compromised situations. And one of them that I do seldomly is form personal relations very, very quickly. I help people as much as I would say perhaps someone that would consider me as a friend. However, my personal relations tend to be very arm's length. I tell the people that all the time. So anyone who's very close to me knows for sure these things. So I use communication to remove all potential miscommunications. Like generally, I don't have a friendship that's bound by how long someone spends time with each other. So that's kind of one thing. So if that makes someone uncomfortable, then we can remain acquaintances. Right? If someone is very uncomfortable in the idea that the only way they can form attachments is that they must literally share. That's one. Communications is a sweet thing if you command it. If you command it well. Oh, we're on our second tune, of course. I mean, our third tune, the fighter. And now we're going to do the same thing. Off we go. This is how we fill the void. Neverwinter Online has always been a B-roll. Okay, there were... how many times in the past when I've actually highlighted something related to Neverwinter? No, not really. Not even trials. There might have been one or two dungeon runs, maybe. I did explain some mechanics back in the day when tanking was like when the game changed fundamentally, but the game hasn't changed fundamentally at all. Tom was good for communication. Yeah, Tom also coincided with the biggest rework, right? As well. Undermountain was also coinciding with the biggest rework. So it actually is related to the idea of increasing communication because of the air of the days of change. And now change hasn't happened in a really long fortunately or unfortunately. For new players, unfortunate. For existing players, it's like mid. It's like meh. Like, it's okay if it change a little, just not too much. So if it doesn't change at all, it's not that big a deal, kind of thing. Life goes on. It's the cereal you have in the morning in which you rotate out every once in a while, but it's safe. It's that mac and cheese you like that's safe. I stream, so I do play games, like not streaming. When I'm streaming, I'm going out to a fancy restaurant and making the most of it. That's probably would be my analogy. So I have a plan, I have a thought, I have a process. What's on stream is a part of me that isn't when I'm resting. When the stream goes off, I'm watching movies, shows, brainstorming, saying absolutely nothing, losing myself in the moment. When I'm streaming, I'm rarely in the moment per se. So if I'm playing a video game and stuff, I'm actively doing intellectual work. So I have a lot to say, and it might sound like it might sometimes look like I always have a lot to say, is because when I get online, I have a lot to say. Or I prepare for it. The one theme that I warn people a lot of times to be aware of is that it's of the frame. So what do we mean? What do I mean by the frame? Nowadays, I would say even the upwards of 50% of someone's mere exposure. So basically, if you see something and you see it a bunch of times, that's mere exposure. So there's a lot of normalization of through mere exposure on the internet. But the internet is through a frame. That frame is your monitor, literally, but figuratively, that frame only captures a part of the picture. So the idea is, even in live streaming, I am trying to communicate in a way that what you see can be entirely planned or rehearsed or subconsciously done. Like, it's not intentional. It sometimes it's not even intentional, it's subconscious. Because, like, let's just do an example of an innocent subconscious routine. Someone likes to stream because they experience social anxiety, so they can't express themselves when they're not streaming. That is a frame construct of this person. But they have normalized socializing on streams. And the people have normalized this person for being sociable on stream. Now, where the danger happens is when someone lacks a self-awareness to understand that they are closed-looping themselves into a skill that has a condition that makes it very non-transferable. And it's also expressing incomplete information unintentionally. So when someone comes by and say, wait, but you said this the other day out of context. Well, the idea is it's twofold. That person took something out of context because you didn't provide enough context, and that other person spends most of the time looking at things only within their context, so they are more likely to take things out of context. It's a closed loop feedback. Like, it feeds to each other. So the goal that I typically use after a while is to make people aware that one must consider the intent, the designer's intent, the creator's intent, anything like a product, a message, content. Get into their shoes, not because you want to empathize with them. Get into their shoes to understand what their motivations are. And for me, I definitely do not want people to get the idea, to stop thinking about how I'm motivated to do things. It's always definitely worth inculcating and rehearsing. Coffee. A good old cup of Joe. Yikes. Yeah, now we're going on 2 hours now. Oof. Yeah, this is not great. Whoops. Trying to get rid of this. Hold up. There we go. I'm keeping the seed of the thought of the discussion while I wait for the coffee run. I don't know if I'm gonna turn this into another digression video. I kind of did one earlier for OS. What would this be called? need a central theme. So yeah, framework. That's another classic, I don't know what you want to call it, but post content creation terminology. I think the inspiration from it actually came mixed with 2 or 3 individuals that I become associated with through the frame. Very arguably very influential people. Increasingly influential people. Just the idea that when you are selectively encountering information that is pre-selected, right? So for example, for me, anything that people know about me is within the context of a stream. And they have to be reminded, in my opinion, it would be a disservice for me not to remind them that there are particular motivations and purposes that I must communicate to not create any misunderstandings about what it's like in front of the stream and not behind, and you know, behind the stream. There are examples, and this includes, or this doesn't excuse like people cannot excuse themselves, in my opinion, when they say, oh, I act like myself, quote unquote, the genuineness, right? A lot of times this will come off as genuineness, where like, oh yeah, I always speak my mind. Well, the thing is, objectively speaking, it's not the same conditions. Like, it won't ever be the same conditions. When you're streaming and speaking your mind, it's still going to be subconsciously or inherently different than when you're speaking your mind not in front of the stream. So, in a way, constantly reinforcing that idea to keep in mind of the context of how you receive your information and present your information. It's not being any less disingenuous. Actually, it might be far more accurate to yourself and to your audience, or to anyone who's listening. Like, for example, when you walk into a classroom, it is sometimes worth giving the impression that you are the instructor and communicating what the responsibility of your instruction is, like as the professor, right? Or as the person who's instructing. You have to communicate that. Oftentimes it's generally once or twice in the entire semester. And that's like the syllabus. The syllabus is the closest thing, I would say. And then the rest is just inferred. To me, there's definitely merit to repeating that kind of thing, not just for the people you're talking to, but for yourself. Like, it's a great reminder and constant self-awareness reinforcement to say these things. So when I'm going out of my way to say, oh yeah, you know, this is why I stream. I stream to record legacy in case it becomes inspirational or reinforced. So it helps me reinforce what it is, and at the same time constantly remind people that this is a part of me that is unique to streaming. It's not it You might be able to learn some like transferable personality quirks, but it has to be meta level of personality quirks. Like, getting to understand my perspective on stream will most definitely, at the higher level of investment, be able to translate to something that's off stream. It's not possible with the superficial impression. So it's not possible in the first minutes or hour or even days. And you don't have to do that. That's kind of the idea. So instead of making it personal, which I feel that type of thing does happen. I keep forgetting to look up that term I'm referring to, where you have an interpersonal relationship with someone who you know through a medium, through a curated medium, like lots of other extraneous factors. So you can form a very strong, attached, accurate, healthy relationship with someone you don't know personally. And personally in the sense that not behind a frame, not behind an edited video. There is a way, a healthy, sustainable mindset to be able to achieve that. It's certainly not being treated that way. Like, what I mean is, a lot of times it's easier or more consistent if you treat everything the same. As in, oh hey, right, here's a double-edged argument for those people, I suppose. I just act like myself on stream. Well, I mean, when you act like yourself off stream, it's certainly different from when you're on stream. That's an objective fact. Like, it's literally off stream or on stream. So what are the percent chances that your off-stream personality that you've curated is appropriate for your on-stream presentation, like whatever value there is? The chances are far less possible than having the mindset of presenting yourself and expressing yourself your own way, your unique way, which is still true to yourself, but appropriate for the circumstances. A true success and mastery of genuineness is to be able to express things through many mediums, in my opinion. So, like, you don't have to sacrifice some sort of identity crisis to be able to adapt your own personal spin on the appropriate communication through different mediums. It's a skill most people don't invest in my opinion, because it is very difficult. Like, a lot of times people talk about, oh yeah, you're just faking it, or you're just telling what people want to hear. One of the hardest tasks to do is to think outside yourself. So if you're wondering, like, oh, pretending is easy, it's not. It's actually counterintuitive for most people. The intuition would suggest pretending to be good at something is easier than putting in the work. That is so counterintuitive. The hardest thing to do is to pretend not to be yourself. Like, I mean, people can't even express empathy for each other most of the time when emotions are compromised. How can you possibly think that it is easy to creatively, sustainably pretend to be someone you are not? Certainly, it's successful for a while. There is one big thing that it's a euphemism that this bleeds into that I like. I find very romantic though. So the whole aspect of pretending until it isn't pretend anymore. So the idea in that case is it's more not necessarily pretending until it's real, It's more believing until it's real. So that's the other pretending thing, where like fake it until you make it kind of thing. That's not faking out of disingenuousness. It's faking in faith and belief. So like if you can make it, you're gonna pretend like that you're going to make it until you do. So that's a little different. I know that comes up quite a bit in the rebuttals of what I just said. But generally speaking, being disingenuous is incredibly difficult. I'm actually this isn't a talk of morality or ethics, but generally speaking, it's quite impressive how long people think spending the whole time denying your own identity is sustainable. 5 years? 6 years? 7 years? Now, you might be thinking, well, actors pretend and stuff. It's like, that's actually part of their identity. So like, it's a fine line between disingenuous and being an actor. Or being, what's another version of an actor? You don't have to be literally an actor. I am a professor when I walk into a classroom. I'm a brother when I talk to my sister. I'm a son when I talk to my parents. That command of whatever you want to call it, appropriateness, is a constant life skill that I will keep on working on all the time. I don't sit on my laurels and say, oh, I can act one way all the time and it's okay. As long as you're honest. As long as you're honest, you can be mean. As long as you're honest, you can be toxic. As long as you're honest, you can say whatever you want. In my opinion, that is relying on eliminating the need or the practice. I won't say it would be ignoring the need or desire to practice the very skill I'm talking about, which is communication. If you don't work on communicating differently, then you just don't. You don't practice it. So one day you're gonna meet this person, right? Say you're a guy who says, I always behave and treat everything all the same, all the time. That definitely no conditions attached. Well, one day you're gonna meet a condition that you have no way to respond to it. And actually, probably sooner rather than later. So when you meet someone who's, I don't know, say you're a ray of sunshine and you always behave like it's a ray of sunshine. And you told this person how good your life is and it ruins that person's life. Well, it's okay because you're being honest. Well, you ruined that person's life. That doesn't change that. Do you have to feel sad about it? Of course not. Like, that's how people become under practice in communication. They do the human thing. They can rationalize it. And that's fair enough. I don't necessarily think that would rob that person of happiness or cross any ethical and unethical lines. It is an observation about influencers online, though. The idea that if you're being genuine, you have no responsibilities, whether intentional or not. Because the intent is what that matters, right? Well, how far does intent go back? If you go around saying that you shouldn't ever do this because it's a crime, and that thing was the thing that shaped someone's life, for better or for worse, is that intent by transference? I don't know, but I worry about it all the time. So, how do I compensate for that? Well, I make it my life's duty to at least in my opinion. I make it my life's goal to constantly strive for an act of futility, if you will, to constantly adjust to the dynamics of human, communication and paradigms. Might not be the best at it. I can tell you, things change pretty rapidly when it comes to online communication, but it's fun. It's a life pursuit. Life pursuits keep one motivated, in my opinion. I don't want to stagnate. In fact, I might even say there's an ounce of fear in there. I think if there's I don't speak about insecurities too often anymore in the present tense, because insecurities are not available or not abundant in the present tense. However, there are a lot of insecurities that I share with past stories. But nowadays, there are still a few insecurities that I keep in my back pocket because it helps remind me of things. And one of the insecurities is failing to be appropriate. And not the same as being politically correct. That's a different story. So let me contrast about being appropriate and politically correct. There are many things that are not politically correct that are appropriate for people who don't obey the paradigm of whatever is considered politically correct. So politically correct is determined by a group of your peers. What is politically correct, what is appropriate, is determined by any combination of group, person, individual, circumstances. So that's what I mean. So if someone needs help, I like to be appropriately helpful. Not necessarily because it's politically correct. So like, for example, you hate this person on principle. It doesn't stop me from helping them. If one of my friends hates someone and they're in trouble, I will help them. Just because my friend hates them doesn't stop me from helping them. I mean, for me, my closest friends are probably the one that probably offered me a hand instead, because, you know, your friends are like you. As long as if you are good at projecting and expressing your thoughts, your friends tend to reflect you very accurately. So generally speaking, if I were in that situation, my friends would be in the car helping me out already. That's kind of the idea. So my biggest existing insecurity that I keep deliberately, I don't want it to go away ever, is my fear of being inappropriate. Inappropriate, not in a lewd way, just inappropriate to the task at hand. It feels awful when I can't do the appropriate thing. It also drives me to do that, though. I wouldn't want that insecurity or fear to go away, ever. The moment it goes away, I become complacent. So that's when I make errors, makes assumptions, leaps of logic, make a fool of myself. And you know, those things do happen. I'm human, right? So I also exercise and practice how to apologize, right? Appropriately. So that fear is a constant reinforcement of a lot of things that I feel I spend a lot of time working on. And that is also slightly different. I also want to make one last disclaimer. That's also slightly different from the face culture. The face culture is it's more like political correctness. So as an Asian, right, as a person of Asian descent, face culture is a real thing. So the whole idea of being nice or polite in public is a decorum acceptance. Extending from that, I don't want to be appropriate. Sometimes being appropriate doesn't mean being nice. They're not one and the same. The Asian fear of public face culture is not dynamic enough for me, but I did take that to heart and use it as a basis for being appropriate. So for example, if someone needed to hate me to feel better, then I am more willing to be the source of hate. That's not a face culture mentality, right? Usually you would not interfere. So you don't want to be the cause of continued consternation. So there's the balance between the Western side of me, like the American side of me, where there are times to act regardless if it's appropriate or regardless if it's self-serving for my public image. Very American, right? So interloping. And then there are times where I do not interlope. That's kind of like a... So not necessarily political correctness or decorum. Like face culture stuff. My parents, on the other hand, are traditionalists. So we've talked about a lot about the deep cuts. I mean, I played a game series, right? Like a Dragon, Ryuga Gotoku, and one of the Lost Judgment, one of the topics is school bullying in the context of the Japanese community, and it does a deep cut into the conformist lifestyle of adults interacting with things like bullying, and that's kind of one of them. The complacent fear of public image may supersede the dire circumstances that requires a break from principle, and I make that exception, and that's kind of more of an American thing. And sure enough, the deep dive into Lost Judgment, it literally in that game made a reference to Americanisms. Like it literally said American psychology in the... So that's kind of the thing, you know? Kind of one of the richness of being multicultural, I suppose. It comes with its trade-offs, obviously. I don't have clarity, for example. If you're multicultural, you tend to not have clarity. Rights and wrongs can provide a lot of clarity, resolve, and conviction. So naturally, as someone who has this type of opinion, my actions could be hesitant. It can be not sufficient in strength. Very ambivalent. It can wreak havoc on one's own self-esteem and behavior. So if you're not one that loves to keep up or like is willing to constantly be exhausted by weighing decisions over and over again, like communicating over and over again, practicing those skills and whatnot, it doesn't complement a lifestyle that involves being quote-unquote enlightened. I don't think enlightened doesn't come being enlightened comes with drawbacks or trade-offs. I would call them trade-offs. They're a drawback to the interested party. They are positives to the, the prideful party. which have you. Those are just negative and positive words, in my opinion. One thing is true. Someone who is more enlightened is likely to be more ambivalent. They have to juggle more things. That can take a toll on pretty much anyone for a very long time. Like my stipulation is I moderate it. I try my best to moderate it. Or else you end up like the old me, juggling like 8 different tasks for 4 different people, while also combating the ambivalence about even doing it in the first place, or able to do it. Sometimes I end up on both sides of the fence. You know? What is a good saying? I don't know if someone said this before, but I just thought about it in my head. I might have taken it from someone. You know, a friend of all is also an enemy of all. So you want to be careful. Just saying. If you're a friend of everyone, you're likely an enemy of everyone as well. So it's a very, very acquired lifestyle. Kind of goes back to whole. I want to bring this back to full circle because it's gonna be part of a digression video. So let's bring it back full circle, and that's where nobility comes in. A nobility is selective. So all that empathy talk, all my personal disclaimers and trade-offs and shortcomings, then we go back to nobility, which is something I don't actively resonate with. As a thought experiment, I continue to try to evaluate the pros and cons of being a noble perspective. So one thing you gain is you gain unconditional loyalty. So you get close friends, intimate relationships very easily. You have people that could possibly, you have this blood oath, right? This understood faith. That is what nobility gets you. While you trade off for all the what ifs and hypotheticals, you have clear decisions that are inferred, almost completely implied. The rest-free, maybe even stress-free lack of need to practice open communication. Because you just don't have problems, right? No problems. If you're part of the club, you went through a lot of hoops to join the club. In order to join such a nobility, you have to fill in a lot of criteria. And those criteria ensures that the vast majority of people are on the same page. So less conflict. Harmonious even, for the most part. They're always on your side. You always have people on your side. And what I mean by that is, my friends can be on my side when they're not. That's the contrast. They are on my side even when they're not. Because the habit of that is they're challenging me. Peer review is a great example. They're challenging me in order to maintain that mindset. They don't do the unconditional loyalty where you get the benefit of the doubt, right? I expect that my friend challenges my competency when something sounds too good to be true. Right? I don't go around like pandering something like, oh man, guys, this is really, really good. Like, you should really check this out. And the first thing I would expect them to say would be, all right, I'll check it out and tell you what my thoughts are. It isn't, oh yeah, then I'm definitely gonna like it. If you like it, then I'm definitely going to like it. That wouldn't be the first, like, necessarily the gut response, right? Because it's not a given. When you're in nobility, you don't have to explain any of that. It's like, hey guys, we're gonna do this dungeon today. Like, oh yeah? What time? I got you back. Hit me up when you can. Alright. Reliable? I would say reliable is a little bit of a interesting characteristic. There is it depends and circumstantial. But generally speaking, I would say consistently people who are loyal and behave like nobility tends to be far more reliable. Because what they do is they liberate the time specifically for a smaller group of people. People who are important to them, people who are close to them, right? So their time exponentially increases. No matter how good I am, if I'm good at all, really speaking, at managing my time, making myself as available as I can be, I will still be worse than if I am a person who selectively pay attention to very specific people. Like, that's just objectively an impossibility any other way. So if I'm a noble person, I would spend most of my time garnering the attention and the relations with the people who are close to me every single day. That will always be more time than having a mindset any different than that. So I have to understand to communicate that. So, you know, my friends and people who I hang out with, I often stress that. Like, remember, if you are comfortable with someone who may be preoccupied at any time, because that's what makes me happy a lot of times, then I hope you can be also happy and share in my perspective on this, right? If you need help helping someone else, hot dog, I'm there too. Generally though, in the nobility sense, they're there to help themselves first and foremost. And it just so happens it helps other people, it's additional. But it's definitely the group first, right? So that's kind of goes back to the first statement about inferring that I was a noble per se in this game. It needs context. I was only invited because I was available. Or from my perspective, I only accept invites and participated because I'm available. Others, I have no control over what they think. So it is very sure that other people might have seen it that way, where I get like preferential treatments for being invited all the time. However, I don't see it that way. My only motivation wasn't because I had special privileges. It was only because I was just available to help out. If they didn't ask me to join the whatever, like the trial or the dungeon, I just go off and play a different game. That's all. Like, it sounds impersonal, but it's also impartial. There was no partialness in it at all. Those who demand my attention get my attention, if I'm available. A noble does not act like that. They act to strengthen their reputation. They in their group or they can be loyal to a group, but a selective group, and they know where their priorities lie. It makes the group stronger. It solidifies their position of power, influence, and it's a great survival tactic. Just saying, it's a great survival tactic. When was the last time you hear an organism that non-discriminately helps everyone? That organism is dead. It probably went extinct a long time ago. The nice thing about being human is you can kind of violate some of those things. I still normalize. I still moderate that though. So I know when that I'm stretching myself thin now. I didn't know this at a younger age. I totally stretched myself thin. Pretty rough. Like horrendously rough. And that was a learning lesson. I'm not going around saying that I'm a saint. Because a saint, honestly, a saint would probably care about the people they care about. A lot of times. Right? Because you're only a saint when to the person who you care about the most. Sainthood isn't benevolence. Because then your attention would be divided. And that's why a human can't be a saint, right? Saint is this holy pedestal thing that violates the reality of being a human being. You can't be omnipotent or ubiquitous anywhere all at once. You can't be truly altruistic because you can't. You have to feed yourself. You have to sleep. You literally only have one body. Perhaps maybe that will change in the future. I don't know. But you only have one body. So I try not to make it sound like it's a one-sided argument. Nobility has its perks. And that is what the Neverwinter community is. Or its strengths in loyalty and passion to D&D also fosters its exclusion, exclusivity, and unwelcoming take on changing any of it. D&D is incredibly powerful, long-lasting, and rich in its history because it maintained that richness in history. It is unadulterated for the most part by other types of conventions. It exudes nobility. Someone's status as a great dungeon master carries weight to any newcomer who's designing their first campaign. While you can be welcoming to the idea, it is not without legacy and possibly nepotism. It's Western, it's Western philosophy. What is the central theme to Western fantasy? Nobility. Like kings, queens, history, baggage, vendettas, politics. Specifically politics dealing with legacy. It's all, it's reinforcing all the same. For better or for worse. I think it's endearing. It's incredibly endearing. I'm not going to change, it's not going to change my personality for that. However, looking at a distance, it's incredibly, I think it's super romantic. When someone, goes out of their way to white knight for someone. Not talking about the consequences of white knighting. I mean, white knighting alone has the air of feudal times. Nobility. When you white knight for someone, you're defending someone who is treated like a king or a queen or what have you, like a nobleman. White knights protect noblemen. All that is, it's cyclic. I'm that scholar, right? I'm that scholar guy. Well, where does the scholar align? Well, they just observe. Is there a problem that threatens all of humanity? That's probably when the scholar has a side, right? And I generally only talk about observations regarding that most of the time. Which leads into our other topic, right? The downfall of communication. Some of these observations, those are the things that interest me. I'm not personally interested, technically for myself, interested in where my reputation is. Or how to help someone get a specific person to bolster their own reputation. I'm more talking about a generalization of something that the state of affairs of things. So I truly believe right now, anyways, that communication is at an all-time low. Does it work? Well, I guess it works right now. I mean, you know, things aren't worse than they were, I think, in some ways, right? The internet has brought a lot of things that it certainly could be a balance. I wouldn't say it's the worst thing ever. It's nice to make these observations, though. Someone's got to make these observations. It's kind of like the whole drawback from Nobility, right? If you don't have anyone outside the loop making observations, well, the closed loop is not going to adapt to many things. For better or for worse. A closed loop is incredibly efficient. An open loop is incredibly inefficient. And the universe exists, well, at least human culture exists with both types. And more.